there's no such thing as a hands-off business. Even when we're talking, in this case, we're talking about businesses that are doing 800 grand, $1.2 million, $1.6 million a year net cash. They're still not hands-off. It's just how it is.
Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, the ultimate destination for accredited investors and entrepreneurs seeking alternative wealth-building strategies. Discover how to fast-track your journey to wealth and time freedom by thinking outside the box. If you're ready to join the ranks of the Contrarian Capitalists and learn the most effective ways to reach your financial goals faster, you're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. I'm your host and your favorite silverback, Sylvania Harrod. And on today's episode, I wanted to bring you guys some good juice for today. So I hope you're ready for it, because I was able to get one of the people I look at as an M&A mentor for myself, Jamil, because Jamil just knows stuff. And as we look at it, I only really like to interview what I consider silverback leaders. These are the guys who are in what they're talking about, not just making courses and YouTube videos and looking like they know what they're doing. They actually have the experience, they have the scars to tell you what's going on, as well as they're benevolent and good human beings. Because I don't fuck with warmongers. So with that being said, Jamil, thank you for coming on. Let people know a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Definitely.
And why are you so freaking awesome?
I appreciate that. That's a loaded question. I would say I guess the best way to describe us at a baseline, we just help U.S. citizens acquire a company. That's the simplest way to explain what we do. Mm-hmm. But we do it in a way where, at least what I like to tell our folks, we'll just grab you by the hair, kicking and screaming to the goal line, and you can decide whether you want to acquire or not at the end of the day. And we do everything along those lines. From a lot of what I see, we're in building of something that just hasn't quite existed in this market before. It's pretty much what you said. There's folks that have courses, there are folks that teach, but there's no one that really wants to go in the trenches with anybody, because it's rough. It's definitely rough out there. And it's more so rough when you're having to deal with the ups and downs and all the other stuff that goes into making 100 calls, having 100 people tell you to piss off, like all that fun stuff. Never mind the mindset issues, right? And so that's what I say we do best. But what we really focus on is getting all that mindset stuff out of the way, getting all the barriers out of the way, so they can look at it how you would if you were looking at like real estate. It's just, here's the deal. Is it something that's interesting? Yeah, no. If yeah, we just keep moving it forward. We try and make it as simple as that. But there's nuance, right? It's business at the end of the day. But that's the core of what we do.
Yeah, I fundamentally understand. And so if we think about what you were just sharing, I don't think people realize how much of a full contact sport M&A is.
100%.
Help them understand some of those. Like what is something before you got into M&A that you thought it was going to be, but then were rudely shaken once you got into the M&A process?
Yeah, and it's different because we do a lot of on market, so we deal with a lot of brokers, and even with that, it's still a lengthy process, a complicated process. But when we started, we were doing off market because that's what everybody says you got to do. And so we really thought the process was going to be as simple as, I'll give an owner a call. I'll say, yep, I'm interested in buying your company. And people are going to be intrigued because who else calls and says, hey, we want to buy your company. And we thought it was going to be as simple as, they're making money. We go to a bank. They're going to love it. It's cash on cash return 5 times, 100 times higher than real estate. And it was going to be simple. And that's 100% not the case. It's not how it works. You make 100 dials, you get 10 or 20 secretaries who will tell you to piss off. You get in front of an owner, you say, hey, I'm interested in buying your company. They'll laugh you out the call. You get to a bank and they'll say, great, awesome, I like this, but here's my request list. And it's 700 documents. The owner's never had to produce, no accountant's ever had to produce. And it takes, 6 or 12 months for them to produce it. And that was just the reality of what we found. And obviously we were trying to do it at with some relative speed. And so we said, okay, let's do a bunch of these at a time. Let's try and figure it out. And it's not the same. We thought we were going into almost a real estate world. It's just not the same at all. where we originally we were maybe looking at 10 or 20 deals at a time. We very quickly realized, okay, 10 or 20 is not going to cut it. We got to look at like 1,000. And we got to do that at scale. We got to do that every single day because owners will call Sunday at 9 in the morning, or we had a couple Sunday at 6 in the morning every time, like clockwork. Only time they want to have a conversation. And if you're not there, someone else is. So it's just as competitive as real estate, I'd say. But in reality, you're competing with guys that are just you're punching way above your weight in essence. Because even at small deals, they tell us like, oh yeah, someone else called. They said they had like $5 billion cash in hand. And we're trying to sit there saying, yeah, we're going to go to the lender. We're going to make this work. We got a couple $100,000. We got money to be able to make it work. And it's, you just don't realize until you're in it. And then when you're in it, you realize even with all the shortcuts, you work with brokers, you work with lenders that deal in M&A all the time. You use templates for everything. You focus on volume. Those things still don't go away. Like you're putting tiny Band-Aids on like a completely ripped off arm. It's basically what you're trying to do. And that's effectively that's what we do now is just we're trying to figure out those small Band-Aids and eventually try and get to a point where it works nice and easy. But even with just how many hours we put in and everything, when we started, it was just not a pleasant thing to get through. But when you get the deal done, there is no feeling like doing a deal. Like we bought real estate, we bought other stuff. We've had, I've done tons and tons of sales, even in marketing agencies and otherwise. There is no feeling like when you close the deal, but it's really quickly, it fades like pretty much within an hour because then you got to operate the thing and you realize, oh shit, like now I got to step in and it's not like starting where you get some leeway to learn. You gotta jump in, especially if it's a multi-million-dollar, $10-20 million business. You got to jump in, you got 100 people's lives you got to worry about. All of a sudden the fear sets in. And until you get to that second deal, that fear doesn't really go away. But an adrenaline rush, you start chasing.
What's interesting about what you were sharing is that, like, if we look at, I'll tell you the illusion versus the reality of what you just shared. So, like, the illusion when you get the book and you listen to all the people that tell you you can buy businesses for zero to no money down, and that there's just plenty of all these boomers who are ready to retire, and they're just giving away their businesses to go through that. Is that illusion or is that a fact? Oh,
that's pure bullshit. This is one thing I definitely tell everybody who comes to us, because this is the thing, right? We deal with a lot of people at this stage. I mean, I would be surprised if we're not the largest like small business acquisitions services company at this stage, in terms of like actually just doing deals end to end. And every single onboarding call, everyone's trained to mention the same thing. The silver tsunami or the baby boomer rush, or there's like 20 different ways to say it. And they all seem so shocked when I explain to them the math of like, hey, baby boomers at this stage, like the youngest baby boomer is like 75 or something, 73, something like that. Do you really think they're still running their company every single day? And the average is like 80. There's no chance that they're still running their company. You're not buying from baby boomers. You're buying from their son or daughter who maybe entered the business 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Maybe we've seen some like only 5 years ago since they actually bought it. They were already sitting flush because they inherited a business that was already cash flowing like crazy. And now they're selling, and now they're trying to set themselves up as good as their parents have been set up. And so it's, like you're still talking about retiring owners, but you're not talking about their 70-year-old guys where they have health issues and they need to walk away because they might die tomorrow. You're still you're talking about guys that are like 50, 60. Sometimes we come across a lot of like 40-year-olds that have they've inherited a great business, or they've bought into a great business. They've done more than well enough. Now it's still the same idea. It's still a passion, because at the end of the day, if it's a family business, it's still a passion. They've seen their dad grow up that business, or their mom grow up that business. And it's different dynamics though. Like they're not looking at the same perspective that people used to talk about like 5-6 years ago of like, oh yeah, you got to be a great pair of hands to take over because your son or daughter doesn't want it. No, these guys are now looking to cash out. They're looking to cash out, but they just want to make sure their employees are taken care of. So there's some guilt trip that's still in the back of their mind around that, which is it's useful, but it's not really the same scenario anymore. It isn't. I mean, 5-10 years ago, yeah. It doesn't mean there's not great businesses out there. Doesn't mean there's not folks retiring every day, but that fallacy is it's garbage. Like that was 5 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. And it's cyclical based on market. Like if you're in healthcare right now and you're buying chiropractors and physio clinics, none of those guys are over 50. Not a single one of them. That was originally where at least where I started, never mind my partners. That's where I started. And I was like, every single person I talked to is 30 or 40. None of these guys want to sell, or they don't want to sell for anything reasonable. Shifted over to HVAC and plumbing, and all of a sudden these guys are 50, 60 average. And we had one, 78. That was the only one. 78, his family wouldn't let him retire. They wanted him to grind out cash until he died. Wild. But even at that point, it wasn't the reality.
Listening to that, I think that's a big paradigm shift that people need to understand, is that while you're being marketed towards, and we're both marketers, so we understand, like, hey, you craft a narrative and then you reinforce the narrative by just spending more to reinforce that narrative to a point where a person's just repeating and regurgitating. We see this in media in the United States all the time, where it's like, oh, this is the narrative that we want to do. Like yesterday I was driving. I'm a Tesla owner. I got Tesla because of its convenience. I love the speed. I love the plug-in. It had the most stable software, it had the most stable charging network. I did not buy it because I wanted to save the world or because I'm an Elon Musk fanboy or anything like that. I bought it because I like the speed. I like the technology. It's a computer on wheels, and I'm in techie. So I bought it because it was a techie. Well, yesterday, there's been some different people in the DC area, because I live outside of DC, that are vandalizing Teslas. And they want to do things, or I have friends in the local Tesla community who are getting notes on there, to the point where I'm driving and I see a sticker on the back of a Tesla. It says, like, I drive the Tesla not because I'm a fan of Elon. And it's just like right on the bumper sticker. So nobody goes and vandalizes their thing because of the narrative that's being driven by media. Because I get it, like that's the whole part, is grab a narrative, hold true to it, and just spend enough so people understand what that narrative is. Then there's the reality, which is, guys, you're not going to walk down the street and find the dry cleaner that you want to do. And that person is going to willingly be like, oh, guess what? I'll sell my business for basically next to nothing, and then give you, and then I'll finance it for you to help you through the process. And then you can just go, like, I had one guy, he was just like, I want to go buy 10 laundromats. Why the hell would you want to do that? He's like, well, because I know laundromats are an opportunity. It's a coin-based business. I can do it. I can put a manager in place. I can go through the process, and I can own 10 of them, and then what happens is that each business should offset roughly like $1,500 a month. And then if I have 10 of them, now I have the 15 grand I need to replace my income. But it's going to be super hands off. I'm not going to be involved in it. What would you say to that person?
I love hearing that one, because so there's two variations of that. It's going to be hands off. It's going to be passive income. The other variation is, I don't want to buy a job. Stupidest fallacy I've ever heard in my life. The reality is, a business is a business. Whether it's a laundromat or otherwise, if you're hiring a manager, all of a sudden you're responsible for their livelihood. People have to take that as hard reality. Now, the funny thing is, because you mentioned about seller finance, and so like we have the hard numbers, because we used to do in Canada, banks are garbage. They're honestly, I tell them all the time, like we had a huge argument with our bank yesterday because they're just asking for stupid stuff. They're horrible for anyone business. But the reality is, in Canada, unless you're going to come up with a bunch of cash on close, you have to do seller finance deal or a majority seller finance deal. And the numbers are not in the favor of what any of these folks love to talk about. Let me tell you, I think we averaged somewhere along the lines of 5,000 dials per seller finance deal. But a dial for us wasn't like just a call. It might have been a 2-hour-long conversation to get to that deal. So it's like, you can get there, but if you're going to do that 10 times over, it's 50,000 dials. Each one for us average like 3.5 to 4 minutes. That's active on phone. That's not like just making a dial and letting it automate, things like that. You're talking about years of your life to get those deals. You can just work for a couple of years, or even for a year, put some money aside, be financially responsible, and buy a deal much quicker. But yeah, the passive income fallacy is one we just, for us, we honestly we don't even entertain it. Like someone says, oh yeah, I want it passive income. Or if I hear Laundromat, to be blunt, I usually just say, cool, we're not for you. Go somewhere else. But you're going to be in for a rude awakening when you get into it, because it's not passive. Like, teenagers go in, they're like, shit, there's no one here, and they start messing around with your machines. Next thing you know, you have a $2,000 repair bill. Like, that stuff happens. That's hard reality. And it's, especially in North America, it's not anything about just like the US only or otherwise, especially in North America, I've found there's no respect for just random shit out there anymore. And so that's why you have people they'll like trash a place or otherwise, because they don't care. It's just how it works. If you were buying in like Japan or something, cool, you could 100% run that remote without any type of hands-on nature, with no manager, because you're going to expect people to clean up after themselves. It's not how society is here. It just isn't. That was a loaded question, to be honest. There's 1,000 different ways my brain was going of like, okay. I hate every single thing that I just heard.
Yeah, it's so the interesting thing for me was that, like, when I first started looking at different companies, I consumed the same content. And then, but I have a natural objectivity when it comes to things, of realizing that everything has beauty and ashes. And that was just a maturation process. Like, everything has its good and bad. And so for me, my buy box became, I'm not acquiring anything that I don't enjoy doing, that I wouldn't do for free. Because I know there's going to be days and months that I'm going to be doing it for free, because there's going to be a $2,000 repair. There's going to be a moment where your tenant is in there on a like, I'll tell you a personal story. Tenants in an apartment that I have, and the amount of damage they did basically for that piece of property, I don't get paid for the next year. And the reality is that the cost it's going to cost me to actually litigate against those repairs is going to be more than the cost it takes to do the repairs. And their security deposit is like 1/10 of the amount. So you have to ask yourself the question, what is my time worth to go through that? Versus a scenario where it's like, oh, if I'm doing something and I enjoy it, like, I just realized that, like, that's just what happens. It's law of averages, and understand that. So when it comes to certain businesses, I'm in the same spot with you. I don't want to own no damn laundromat. I grew up going to laundromats. I know exactly what kids do in laundromats, I know exactly what what's going there, and generationally and things going on. I'm like, no chance. I want anything to do with that. If I'm going to do a business, as I was saying them to one guy the other day, I want to do luxury car rental. You want to know why? Because I like luxury cars.
Yep.
Like, I want to pick up the phone and say, hey, Mama and I are going out. The first lady and I are going on date night. She wants the purple one. Okay. Is that currently reserved? What color is available? Do I have for the next 48? Okay. You're going to come drop it off. I'm at the house. And so just drop it off, swap, take mine. Cause it needs to be taken to get service done on it. All right. Got it. Capiche. That's it. And I am a silent investor, and it's good. Cause I'm just like, oh, cool. This is what we need. Take it out of my dividends that you're going to be issuing, and we're good to go. Like, we like luxury rentals. Cool. Well, guess what we're going to do? That we're going to spend time in anything that's associated with that, because that makes it easier for us. But I also have a definitive buy box, because I got kicked in the teeth a few different times, and you realize, oh my God, this is awful. Like, making sure that there's no lawsuits on companies before you decide to acquire them, because then you're named as a plaintiff and you can get your ass in trouble, Yeah. If people want to disclose it.
All the fun stuff that you encounter.
Yeah.
Those ones are the most fun. I say fun. At this point, it's just day to day, right? But that's the stuff that you can't wrap your head around, because you just can't check that stuff like you can in real estate.
Yeah.
You can check what you can, but there's always a place for them to bury the bodies.
Correct. There was a person that came across me just asking quick questions. And I looked at it. I had my buddy look at it, because I just wanted a third party opinion there. And we go, like, there's so much debt load on this thing. Like, there's so much debt load, and they're talking about potential. Potential is cute, but like, I like to see where is the actual contract? Is it signed? Is it committed? Like, how many of those do you have? what percentage of revenue do you have? And so all that to say, to land the plane on that topic, which is, if you're currently, I just think about it from the frame of the person listening to this. You're sitting at the job, you're working 50, 60 hours a week. You have a family, you have kids, you have certain expenses that are going out. Knowing that you're trading in 60 hours for potential 90 hours, just to say you're on your own and you own your own things, is that something you truly want? And if so, like, is the trade-off worth the return you're going to receive? Because you have the opportunity to double your income and go through that. But that's kind of what I think of from that. What has been your experience when you see people and they're kind of on that fence? You get a person who's a high income earner and they're looking to replace it. What would you suggest to that individual?
I mean, generally we look at how do we replace it, right? I mean, we have a lot of folks. So we have one. I'm gonna try and somewhat sanitize what I say here, because otherwise you might listen and be like, "Oh shit, that's me." He's a very high income earner, set mid 7 figures a year in his job. He cannot replace his job in one acquisition. It's just never going to happen. Especially with lifestyle inflation. He invests in other stuff. It's just never going to happen. Yeah. So normally what we do in any case is we usually roadmap. Okay, here's where you're at. What is it going to take to get there? What are you willing to bite the bullet on? And oftentimes when we're talking like 400 or 500 grand plus, we're looking at multiple acquisitions to get there with enough wiggle room that you're not in a situation where shit can hit the fan and all of a sudden you're having to take a massive hit on lifestyle. But at the same time, we also, if you're screwing around with your personal finances, like we wouldn't approach it anyways. And you got to set out your personal finances properly first. But if someone comes in with that, and so he's a good example, we're going to have to make 5 acquisitions total at a minimum to get to where he's at, net tax, everything else, like net benefit. And he understood that right off the bat. He said, it's never going to happen in one. Tell me what it's going to take. And so the acquisitions that we're looking at, really strategic. They're ones that have to already have the type of owner who fits with how he's going to operate. And he came in understanding, like, yeah, my wife's probably going to jump in and handle some operations, because there's no such thing as a hands-off business. Even when we're talking, in this case, we're talking about businesses that are doing 800 grand, $1.2 million, $1.6 million a year net cash. They're still not hands-off. It's just how it is. So same idea, right? You have to reverse engineer your way there. For some, if it's 300 grand a year, you can reasonably buy a company of that size that replaces your income, gives you leeway, allows you to hire some management, allows you to have a little bit of cash left over to pay down debt more aggressively. And you can reasonably get there as long as you've taken the steps when you got that income to make sure that you're personally okay, right? Like actually put money aside. Don't just spend all your money, all that. So assuming you're doing everything somewhat right, it's not hard to replace that. But when you go above that, it's expectation set. I mean, the more companies you buy, the Laundromat's a great example. You buy one laundromat, chances are even when you hire management, you're spending the same amount of time if you buy 10 laundromats versus 10 companies that are doing $1 million a year now. You're going to spend the same amount of time, even if you're hiring management, because a company always requires some form of attention, whether it's the bank calling you because you screwed up payments, or auto pay is not working, or payrolls due and someone screwed up the AR and the AP, and now you got cash sitting there cash that's waiting, not quite sitting there to pay off that payroll. That shit happens. Like that's just shit you gotta expect. I mean, you just got to plan for it. But if you plan for it, you can get there. But it's not usually as easy as most folks like to make it sound, especially like the YouTube folks. Like they'll just say, "Yep, you're doing $500,000 a year," or I know one of our competitors does this of like, "Oh yeah, if you make $1 million a year, like we'll help you replace it in one deal. We'll place a manager for you. We'll run it for you." It's like that's just not how it works. I mean, we bought enough companies, especially for ourselves, definitely for others, where we know that never happens, even if everything sounds like it's set up that way. Like we've definitely had a lot, especially when you go to digital companies, getting like $1 million a year. It's a lifestyle first business. But when you take over responsibility, 20 hours a week from the current owner is really double time for a new person coming in, because they got to learn it. They got to master it. They got to become awesome at it. And if they ever decide to leave, especially when you're focusing on that management layer, if they ever decide to leave, like you're screwed if you never bothered to take the time to understand it, which is kind of how most of these guys seem to think about it. Is a buy, someone else will run it. I'll never have to learn how it works, and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think of the worst case scenario. That guy might even get hit by a bus. Never mind leave.
Correct.
And then you're shit out of luck. I mean, that owner is, especially if you're looking at retirement, that owner is probably already off. He's in Boca. He's spending his money. He doesn't care. He doesn't care to take your phone call 6 months later. It's just not going to happen.
It's a true story, my man. It's totally true story. So like, to land the plane on our interview today, I always like to ask a simple question. The person listening to this is possibly on the fence. Like they've consumed content, they're hearing other information, they're seeing it, but they're kind of just like in a place of like indecision. So if you were sitting across from a person, like what's one piece of advice you would tell that individual to help them get off the fence and move towards starting to take action?
I'm going to have to break this down as almost two elements. So, and the reason being, a bunch of folks are going to hate this. If you have an MBA, you got to let go of the idea of this is going to be a hardcore curse, spreadsheet fucking shit to death. And you got to understand that you're going to have to get outside your comfort zone really quickly if you want to get yourself at even, and just even, literally sidestep into an acquisition that gives you ability to add value, add assets, add wealth, and continue building on top. For folks that don't have an MBA, because they don't tend to overthink things as much, the biggest thing is just you got to look at it from the view of other folks. Mm-hmm. In an acquisition, there's 4 or 5 other layers that you tend to deal with. You deal with a seller, you deal with a lender, you deal with sometimes a broker, and then you potentially have to deal with other folks as well, like investors, whatever else. Being able to look at something from that point of view and say, is what I'm trying to do feasible at each of those levels? That's where you get folks that can really make stuff happen and make things work really, really well. So if they're looking at it as, I make 300 grand a year right now, I got to figure out a way to replace that and ideally build. So 5 years from now, where in my job, I might be making 400 instead of making 600 or 800 or $1 million, or I'm just making that 400 and now I have someone else run all the day to day. You got to look at it from what is it going to take from all those other perspectives, right? Is a lender going to be willing to fund that if you're sitting on cash? Well, or if you're not sitting on cash. If you aren't, you probably need to spend the next 12 months, bank away as much capital as possible, or put it into real estate and start building up some assets to be able to leverage. If you're not a people person, or you're not great at networking, you got to look at it from the seller and broker point of view. Are you going to be able to have a reasonable conversation and get across why you could be a good acquirer, why you can be a good operator, why you're going to be able to take care of their employees? If not, things to work on, easy skill sets to work on. You can get that massively turned around in a couple months. If you're in a position where you've screwed yourself over, maybe got bankruptcies, whatever else, those are all things you can work on too. You're just gonna have to take a little bit more time. And so the baseline I would always say is like, make sure you can reasonably present well on a call. If you got that covered, next thing is make sure you have a reasonable credit score. If you got that, and I mean, in the US, you can get 100 points added to your credit score in like 3 months. It's an easy thing to do. You can get that covered quickly. Then the last one is, as long as you are looking at it from the right point of view of, I'm likely going to sidestep and then I have to put in work to build value, then you're going to be sorted. That mindset in particular, that last one, is probably the biggest. It's a really hard conversation we tend to have with folks of like, hey, you're doing 400 grand a year. You might be sitting on enough capital right away, but if you're going to jump into a business that has 30 or 40 other people, you've never managed that level of team before, you've never managed that level of complexity before, you've never handled financial statements before, it's a lot to jump into. Like, you're putting yourself in the deep end, tying a 1-ton cinder block to yourself and jumping in. It's basically what you're doing in those scenarios. So you got to take it with the chunk of what you can handle, what you're willing to do in terms of stress load, what you're willing to do in terms of sacrifice of time as well, because there will be sacrifice of time. If you're used to, we've had a few in the tech space. If you're used to working 25 hours a week because you were able to get away with it working remote, that's not always going to be the case when you take over, when you're transitioning, when you're learning a new industry, when you're learning a new business, when you're potentially having to learn financials, learn how to read a P&L statement, how to work with things like that. So it's elements that you got to take, but if you can look at it from those perspectives, and you can align and check box every single one and be like, yep, I can make that work. I can make that work. I can make that work. And here's my plan to get there, of like kind of what you said, a hardcore buy box of this is what I'm after. Here's what it needs to net to me. Here's what that needs to look like and how I'm going to make it work to get to where I want to be 4 or 5 years from now. And, you know, if you can't look at it that long term point of view, like there's other mindset stuff you got to work on. But if you can hit all those boxes, I mean, you're well set up. You can easily jump in. You can get a deal done in 5-6 months. You can shift from that employee to entrepreneur very, very rapidly. And bluntly, like that's what we look for. And we say like, yep, that person's going to be successful, or that person is going to take another 6 months until they're at a point where they can start being successful.
No, it absolutely makes sense. I see on my side that like, even when I'm going through and helping people raise capital in a way, it's always so unique just seeing the different operator mindset that makes things happen versus those who like overanalyze stuff. And it's more of like, I need enough information to say yes, but not too much where I have to pause for 6 months to go through things because you have to overanalyze things. So no, man, there was so much juice in what you just shared there. So I just hope people are able to go back, listen to it multiple times to be able to decipher it, because there's different phase. There's a difference. I was sharing with a mentee the other day. There's a difference between knowing and understanding. You know, like 100%. I can know lots of things, but you don't know what it's like to be a parent until it's 4:30 in the morning and your daughter gets stung by a hornet, like what happened to me the other night. You know, like, and so like you just hear bloody murder screaming of what's happening, and you're just like, I don't know what's happening. I need to get up. I need to go kill something. I don't know what's going on. And you're just like, a hornet? And what were they doing? Like everybody was just so surprised. Like, if you're outside playing and doing stuff, but like in your bed in the middle of the night when they normally sleep, this guy was just drunk, hanging out with friends, and just took a wrong turn, is what I'm guessing, man. But makes it all fun. How can people get in contact with you if they're listening to this episode? Is there a site or social media things they should be able to find you in?
Yeah, I mean, if they look up Regalis Capital, Regalis with an S, I guess there's some other folks that didn't do some nice things, but Regalis Capital, if you look it up, I'm sure all the stuff will pop up. Yeah, I mean, that's the best place. If you look that up on Facebook, you should get our group. We drop a bunch of free stuff in there just because. Same idea. I know we can't work with everybody. I know we can't help everybody, but my passion of things is talking deals. Other folks like to golf. I literally like to talk deals pretty much all day, every day. So that's why we have that group. It's fun. Just hang in there, shoot the shit, talk through deals, make stuff happen. And by all means, if they want to work with us, they can take a look and see if it makes sense.
No, I love it, man. So Jamil, thank you for dropping so much value the last 35 minutes. I greatly appreciate it. And so anybody listening to this, as always, stay hungry, stay humble, and stay grateful, my friends. Cheers.